Hello everybody, it's Kara from Wild Book Garden, and today I'm here with the Stand With Trans Kids book tag. This tag was originally created by Leo Bancroft. I will link his original video down below, and I was not officially tagged. Leo did tag me in the comments later, but I saw this video on Kazan from Always Doing's channel. I will link her video down below as well, and that's actually how I found Leo's channel, and I've been loving his content. Like, he just... really just watching him lifts my heart and spirits every time I see a video from him. I love this tag. I love Leo's channel. Please check him out and the tag. And this tag is obviously all about standing with trans kids. Trans kids are facing a lot of violence right now, and this is just one way that we can show them they are loved. As Leo has said, if just one trans kid comes across this playlist that he makes or these videos and they know that they are loved and they are important and supported, and that there are stories about kids like them being loved and supported, Leo says then he will feel he has done his job. And I fully agree, so let's get into the questions. Number one is to tag some fabulous friends who also may want to do this tag and stand with trans kids. I'm going to tag Annalisa Ely, Kelly from Cozy Reader Kelly, Bethany from Beautifully Bookish Bethany, and Margaret from The Word Nerd. If you guys would like to do this tag, I would love to hear your answers, so consider yourself tagged if you'd like to do it, and of course anybody else who sees this and who wants to do this tag. I am happening to put mine up in June, which is Pride Month, but obviously every month is a good month to stand with trans kids. Number two is tell us about some books on your TBR pile featuring a trans/non-binary character or nonfiction about trans/non-binary stuff. And I have one fiction one and one nonfiction. I have Between Perfect and Real by Stevie. This is, I believe, a non-binary author, and this is about our main character who is known as a lesbian, but he is realizing throughout the book that he's actually a trans boy. And it also involves a theater production of, I think it's a Shakespeare play. Yeah, Romeo and Juliet. So like he gets cast as like a non-traditional Romeo, and that's one of the things that makes him start thinking that he should maybe tell people that he is actually a boy. I've heard like fantastic things about this one. I know it's going to be amazing. I love the sound of the story, and I love books about theater, so I'm really excited about this, and to see like theater used to explore gender in this way, so I don't know why I haven't read it yet. The Story of a Booktuber's Life. And the nonfiction is not specifically about like trans issues or like that kind of subject matter, but the author is trans, and that is Laziness Does Not Exist by Devin. This is a book about like fighting back against like hustle culture, productivity culture, and obviously, as you can tell from the title, it's about the fact that like laziness as a concept is actually completely made up. Like there's no like actual like basis for it. So Dr. Devin Price is a trans and non-binary author, and from what I've heard, and often happens with nonfiction by marginalized folks, like that lens I think is going to influence some of the specific things they talk about or the ways they view things. But as I said, this is kind of like a bonus answer for this question because this is not specifically about trans issues. That's another one that I've heard really great things about. Number three is to recommend a favorite book slash show slash movie featuring a trans or non-binary character. I don't watch a lot of TV or movies, so all of my answers are going to be books here. And I did pick two by the same author. I'm sorry, but we know I love them, so I had to. I picked two Anna Marie McLemore books. The first one is Lake Lore. This is their most recent publication, and I really loved this. Both of the main characters are trans and non-binary. One of them is also dealing with ADHD, and the other one is dyslexic. And both of those things are own voices as well as the non-binary identity, and I just always love Anna Marie McLemore's writing and characterization. The way that these two characters like come together and start like being there for each other and understanding each other and caring for each other is really beautiful. I also love the family dynamics, and I also love the like magical realism aspect of this novel, which is related to a lake near where they live, and kind of how the magic starts like seeping out of the lake and into their town. It has to do with our two main characters, Bastian and Laure, and what they're going through individually, and also they think kind of with their relationship as well. So I continue to love everything Anna Marie McLemore writes, so that is not surprising. And then I also wanted to pick one of theirs that I don't feel like I talk about as often, but it is fantastic as well, and that is Dark and Deepest Red. This one is Dual Timeline, which is not something I often enjoy, but unsurprisingly I love it when McLemore does it. And one of our primary love interests is a trans character, and I love the way that this book really talks about the way that people can conceal parts of their identity, and this book does not judge people for that. Like if like people sometimes do that for reasons of safety, it's a book about like accepting and loving who you are and finding, you know, strength and peace in that, but it also doesn't like shame people, and I think that was really lovely. I also think the historical aspects of this one are really, really interesting. This book is a Red Shoes kind of retelling, and then also it is based on the Dancing Plague in Strasbourg in, let's see, 1518. So yeah, really, really love this one. I need to talk about it more. And then I also picked a book that is not by Anna Marie McLemore, and that is Pet by Amezi. Our main character is a trans girl named Jam, and this book is one of the ones that does not, it's not specifically about her gender identity. Like, it's not about Jam trying to accept herself or trying to get other people to accept her. Her parents are actually really supportive. Like, we do get a little bit about when Jam came out, and it was just shown as a very like welcoming and loving experience, and I think that is really important for kids to see as well. I feel like a lot of people have praised this book, so I'm just kind of piling on to that, but I do think it's fantastic. It's very short, but it really packs a punch. Our main character Jam lives in this kind of utopian society where all of the monsters have been defeated. But then a mysterious creature called Pet shows up and says that that's not actually true, that there is still a monster left, and that the monster is living in Jam's best friend's house, and Jam doesn't want to believe this, but we see her and her best friend try and figure out what's going on. And this book obviously deals a lot with the concept of monstrousness. On the back of the book it says, "This award-winning novel from a rising star author asks, what really makes a monster? And how do you save the world from something if no one will admit it exists?" I just think it's really well done. It's strange to hear Amezi described as a rising star author, because I feel like they have achieved stardom. Like, I feel like their books are very, very well loved. And as you can see from this award stickers on this one, that includes Pet. Number 4, everyone has their own journey and no one demographic is a monolith. Recommend a book with a journey, however you define that. So I picked 2 books for this one. One of them is King of the Dragonflies by Case and Callender. I adore this book. This is one of my favorite books that I read last year. And it's about a young black boy who is kind of coming to terms with his own sexuality throughout the book, and so it's a very like internal journey, but there are also like physical journeys as well, related to our main character King and also his best friend, who has kind of been ostracized because people know that he is gay. I just think this is such a like thoughtful and compassionate and warm book, and I feel like it is one of those books, this is a middle grade novel, it's one of those that does show the realities of what kids can go through, but there's also hope and love in it. And I think that especially for middle grade books that are showing kids dealing with these kinds of things, I think that is so important to see that that there are going to be people who love and support you, and I just really, really love this novel. And Case and Callender is also a trans author, and the one that is not by a trans author but that I do think shows a journey, and I just really love this book, is Firekeeper's Daughter by Angeline. I finally read this novel and it was as amazing as everyone said. I feel like this book is very well known, so I won't spend too much time on this one. This is a contemporary novel that is also a mystery kind of thriller book. We're following our main character Donis Fontaine, who is biracial. She lives on an Ojibwe reservation, and she gets pulled into an FBI investigation involving some drugs that have been turning up, specifically meth, and the damage it is doing in her community. And she also witnesses a brutal murder, which is what makes her decide to join the FBI in working to expose what's going on here. Yeah, the writing is fantastic. The characters are fantastic. I said, like, I love Donis so much. Like, she's one of those characters where, like, I want to be a good enough person that Donis would be my friend. The cultural elements are integrated into the story beautifully. The family dynamics are so complex and interesting. I love the sense of community and how you can see how close Donis is to, like, her family members and the elders of her community. And in terms of a journey, this one is definitely like a journey of, I think, knowledge with the mystery element, and also a journey with Donis kind of figuring out where she fits in terms of her identity and her community. Number 5, none of us knows everything, even about our own identities, especially since we're not a monolith and each have our own journey. What is a book that taught you something, either about yourself or the world around you? And I have a few answers, so I'll try to go through these pretty quickly. One of them is actually A Wrinkle in Time by Madeleine. The most recent time I reread this book was in 2018, which is obviously 4 years ago now. And the reason I picked this is because this is, I think, what really kickstarted my love for middle grade and my like passion for how important it is that older readers read middle grade. Because I remember this was around the time that the new movie was coming out. I think that's why. And people were reading this book and just like being very condescending about it. Like, there was a lot of reviews going around about, like, I'm sure if you're a middle grader this was fine, but it was too whimsical, or it wasn't good enough. Like, basically reviews that were not super specific, except that people thought they were too good for this book. And I, being the stubborn, contrary person that I was, is like, you know what? I haven't read those books in a while, but I'm gonna go ahead and read them again. And I really, really enjoyed this. And that kind of, like I said, that really, I think this was one of the books that really like invigorated my love for middle grade as an adult. So I'm very grateful for that. I also wanted to mention Radical Reinvention by Kaya Oakes, An Unlikely Return to the Catholic Church. This is a memoir that I read recently and really, really loved. And this is one that, like, in the sense of teaching me something, it was more just like reminding me of something that I already knew, which actually goes along with several of these questions about identities not being a monolith. In a lot of ways, Kai Oakes is not like what you would expect from somebody in the Catholic Church, and I just really resonated with a lot of what she talks about here. And one thing that I really was affected by is the way she talks about how the actual numbers show that the like Catholic people who are in the media a lot are not actually representative of the demographic, like not at all actually, for most people, and not that we should ignore the people in power who are, you know, in favor of these really bigoted ideas, but it was very interesting, and I think it's useful to know that one of the ways it can feel very hopeless about not being able to change things is when you think that there aren't very many of you, and she shows that there are. Also, Humankind by Rutger Bregman. I don't remember the translator for this. I will put that in the captions. But this is a nonfiction book about like basically debunking the idea that seems so basic for a lot of us, I think. This assumption a lot of us have that humankind is, like humans are basically selfish, and that people are constantly having to fight against this natural instinct to be selfish or to be cruel. And I just found this book like a revelation, really. I think this is a book that would really change a lot, I think, if more people knew this, because it goes against so much of what we believe and what we've been taught about human nature. And again, he doesn't like discount the fact that there are people who do really horrible things, but I think one of the great takeaways from this book is that deciding that the world is awful and people are awful and there's nothing you can do about it, that's kind of the easy way out. I mean, it's very understandable that people can get disheartened. I know that happens to me a lot. But I think one of the great points that he makes in this book is that by believing that most people are more good than bad, that should actually like galvanize you to do something about the things in the world that are wrong, because it's like, how can we let this happen if we truly believe that that people are mostly good, which we have seen proven over and over again. And he talks about a lot of the studies that supposedly disprove this idea, like the Stanford prison experiment, the Milgram shock trial, like these very famous experiments that supposedly prove that that humans are bad, like most humans are. And he like shows how that's not actually true. So really recommend that one. And then the last answer for this question is White Rage by Carol Anderson, The Unspoken Truth of Our Racial Divide. This book was really big like a couple years ago, obviously, but I think it is still really worth reading. I know it's one I'm definitely going to want to reread. And this is a nonfiction book about obviously white rage and how in the United States, every time there has been a gain of rights by Black people that they should have had all along, the backlash to that has been vicious. And she just really takes you through different periods of history and shows how like there's always been this pattern of like Black people finally get something they should have had the whole time, and white people are furious about it and do a lot of violence and harm because of that. And specifically something that I learned a lot about was the Reagan administration and some really, really horrible things that he was part of and that he like spearheaded. Yeah, just very, it makes you incredibly angry to read this book, but I think it is so important. Number 6, when things are hard in the world or in our lives, sometimes there are things we can do to help center and refocus ourselves, to bring joy, to keep us going, to keep living, resisting, being our authentically amazing selves. What are things that you do to center yourself or find joy? And I actually, I need to do a lot better about this. I have not been doing great with taking care of myself lately, but things that I do like to do when I'm actually being good about this, obviously reading is a big one for me. Like that is really one of the only things that can kind of calm down my brain. Reading is my primary hobby. I really love it. And it's also one of my primary methods of self-care. I also have gotten really into candles lately. I've talked about this in a couple videos and I find that really like soothing and cozy. I also have always really liked scented things, so that's nice as well. And then also knitting. I really would like to get back into doing knitting more often, and I'd even like to show some of that in my videos, I think. But I always get self-conscious because it's like, what if the project is not like impressive enough to show people? Which, saying it out loud, I know it's silly, but it's still hard to overcome that feeling. But yeah, I really want to get back more into knitting and doing that more consistently, because that is something that I really enjoy and that does bring me like comfort and peace, and just like calms down my anxiety some. Number 7 is, what's your walk-on music or your feel at home in your body music? And I used to only have one answer that would really fit for this one, but now I actually have 3. So the one that I've had for a while now, I know it's basic, but Born This Way by Lady Gaga, I really love that one, and that is definitely like a feel at home in your body song for me. Also Most Girls by Haley Steinfeld, I love that one. It's also very indicative of something about my personality, which is that the not like other girls idea is one of my least favorite things to encounter in fiction or in the real world. And my sister actually sent me that song and was like, this sounds like you, like this sounds like your brand. And I'm like, yes, thank you. Now my other one is kind of a weird one, I guess, but that's actually Jealousy by Olivia Rodrigo. Because that one, it's like, especially the part where it's like, I know their beauty is not my lack, but it feels like that. And I just think that's a nice reminder that like, we all suffer from these feelings of, if I look at somebody that I consider beautiful, I don't look like that. And you have to remind yourself that there are, like, you can't measure differences against each other and say one is better than the other like that, you know? But anyway, really love all those songs. Number 8, finding mentors, people of wisdom, or heroes can be another way to help us navigate life. Who are some of your mentors? Can you share something they taught you or inspired you to learn more about? So I have 2 people I want to mention. One is my mom. I'm really close with my mom, and I know I'm very lucky for that. And I actually have 2 pieces of advice from her, which it's kind of funny because somebody who's even worse at taking care of herself than me is my mother. Like, I love my mom and she's a great role model for a lot of things, but self-care is not one of them, or work-life balance for that matter. And it's funny because both the pieces of advice are related to taking care of yourself. But one thing she has always been a big proponent of is the idea of your body knowing what it needs. And obviously there are exceptions to this, where, like, you know, you need help regulating your body's responses and things like that. But in general, I think people can be hard on themselves for doing what their body needs. And like, one example is like, I would always feel horrible about myself if I had a lot I needed to get done that day, and then I would like take a nap for like a couple hours. I would feel so bad about myself when I woke up. And my mom would always say, like, your body needed the sleep. Like, that's obviously what happened. And it's such a little thing, but I think that is something that can really reframe the way you view your body and like listening to your body. And then the other piece of advice from her is that you don't get points for making things harder on yourself than they need to be. And this is kind of in the context also of like self-care or taking care of yourself, because sometimes when I'm doing like a big project that I'm really stressed about, I will break it up into these little tiny pieces, or I will like do things that kind of like trick myself into getting work done, or to thinking like, or to doing more. Like, maybe there's a project I really don't want to work on, but then there's something else I have to do that I want to do even less. And if I like take a break from the thing I really hate, then I will get a lot done on the thing that I don't hate quite as much, or things like that, where it's like I would feel almost embarrassed that I have to like trick myself into doing things. And that's when my mom would tell me, like, you don't get extra points for making things harder for yourself. And I just think that's good advice. And then the other person I wanted to talk about is one of my professors when I went to college, who taught the Shakespeare classes that I took. That was the first class, like she taught all the Shakespeare classes I took. I joked with her one time that I basically have a minor in her classes because that's how many classes I took. Which she loved hearing that. And she's just like a phenomenal teacher. I am so grateful that I got to learn and to discuss in her classes. Like, I learned so much about Shakespeare. That was really the time when I started falling in love with Shakespeare, was when I was taking her classes. And like, now it's like hard to imagine there was a time when I wasn't a huge fan of Shakespeare. And something else that I think she showed us that is really valuable is that you can love something and still critique it. She was always very upfront about the fact that, like, for one thing, you didn't even have to like Shakespeare to be in her classes. But also she's like, we can talk about his incredible work and his storytelling and acknowledge that he was not always a great person. Like, we talked about how during one of the grain shortages in England at that time, he hoarded grain and sold it for like extortionate prices. So like, that was one of the ways he made his money. So just this idea of people being very complex and of being able to enjoy something and love something, but to talk about problems with it as well. I think that's really valuable. Number 9 is, who are some out trans/non-binary booktubers, Instagrammers, authors, actors, etc. who you'd like to shout out? So obviously Leo, I've already talked about how much I am adoring his channel, and I'm so grateful that I have found his content. As I said, he is just so like warm and kind and thoughtful. Like, I truly can't oversell how much my heart lifts just like watching his videos. He is just like the warmest, kindest person, and I love his content. Also, I mentioned Anne Marie Macklemore. I really, really love following them on different platforms. They're not like super active in social media necessarily, but I just really pay attention to like not only obviously their books coming out, but any kind of projects they're involved in. I think they're also just a great like role model in general. They just seem like a really, really wonderful person. I just love them as an author and as a person. And then I also wanted to mention Bear from Et2 Brody. By the way, I will link all these people down below, of course. They're really great for, they read a lot of horror and watch a lot of horror, which is not my thing, but they also read and watch a lot of science fiction and fantasy, which is definitely my thing. So they're great for recommendations for that, specifically for Indigenous authors. I'm so grateful because their review was really one of the the major ones that brought Lots Away by Darcy Little Badger to my attention, and that was one of my favorite books the year I read it. I just really adored that novel, and I'm really glad that Bear talked about that book and really was like hyping it up before release. And they also talk a lot about queer books, and especially the intersection of Indigenous and queer authors. So if that's something that you're interested in, please give them a follow. Number 9 is, what are some organizations you'd like to shout out for supporting trans kids or trans folks? So one of them I want to talk about is Camp Indigo Point. I think the camp has like officially ended at this point, but you can still donate to support their work, and to support, like, they're giving out like scholarships and helping kids go there who wouldn't be able to afford it normally. And they're like a week-long camp that is about, like, it's specifically for trans kids from 2nd grade to 11th grade, and it's about just like them having a wonderful camp experience, and like a wonderful experience of just being like appreciated and accepted and loved. And I will link all the info down below, but it's such a wonderful looking program. I encourage you to check them out and donate if you can. Again, like the program for this year I believe has ended, but they're still continuing to do work and probably get ready for next year, and to do other kinds of projects related to supporting trans kids as well. And they have kids from all over the country as well. They're based in like the St. Louis area in Missouri, but they have kids from all over the country who have come and participated in this, and just looks like a really wonderful program. Then another one I wanted to mention is the Trans Education Network of Texas, and as you can tell, they are really big on like education and getting like resources out there, including things like workshops, and they also are really big in like hearings and kind of like providing like court and legal support for trans kids. So please check them out as well. And obviously there's a lot of other very worthwhile places to check out. One thing I also love about Leo's channel is he always mentions a nonprofit that he wants to lift up and give some love to. Okay everybody, so that was my probably very long Stand With Trans Kids book tag. Thank you again, Leo, so much for unofficially tagging me and for creating this wonderful tag. Again, I tag anybody who would be interested in this any time of year. It's always a good time of year to do this tag. And thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you soon with another video, and I hope you love the next book you read. Bye!